He had no father, no home, and shoes that never fit right. The world laughed at his torn coat and his clumsy walk, but they had no idea who he would become. One day, standing in front of a cracked mirror, staring at his own sadness, he did something no one expected. He smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because he refused to let it win. That broken man became Charlie Chaplin, and his secret changed how the world understands laughter forever. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never see a smile the same way again. There was a man who lost everything before he ever found anything worth having. He came into the world without a soft place to land, without a father to walk beside him and show him which roads were safe and which ones would break him. There was no home waiting at the end of his day, no warm light in a window, no familiar door that opened just for him. Whatever shelter he found by chance. And whatever comfort he knew, he had to invent for himself, because no one had thought to give it to him. Even his shoes did not belong to him, not really. They were too big, flapping loosely with every step, borrowed from a life that never quite fit him properly. He laced them each morning, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because a man without shoes cannot walk toward anything, and walking was all he had left. His coat was thin and torn at the elbows, patched together with whatever scraps he could find, offering little protection against a world that rarely showed him any warmth of its own. Every morning, the city woke up cold and indifferent to him. The streets were damp with old rain, the air heavy with a chill that settled into his bones before the sun had fully risen. He walked with a stomach that ached louder than his own footsteps, a hunger that gnawed at him from the inside, and a heart that carried a weight far heavier than anything he carried in his hands. The wind did not slow down because he was tired. The morning did not soften because he was hungry. The world simply continued on its way, indifferent and unbothered, and he had no choice but to move forward with it, one uneven step at a time. People noticed him, but rarely with any kindness. They saw the torn coat and the mismatched shoes, and their eyes would linger just long enough to judge. They watched his clumsy, off-balance walk, the same walk that would one day make the whole world laugh with love, and back then they only laughed with mockery. Some didn't even bother lowering their voices. To them, he was a stumbling stranger who didn't belong among their tidy streets and their comfortable mornings, an easy target for an unkind smile shared between friends. He heard the laughter. There was no way not to hear it. It found him even when he tried not to listen, settling quietly into his chest alongside the hunger and the cold. It was not the kind of pain that screamed, it was quieter than that, and somehow heavier for its silence. Shame has a way of sinking in deep, of making a man feel smaller than he already believed himself to be. Many men, faced with that kind of laughter, morning after morning, day after day, would have eventually stopped walking altogether. They would have sat down on the nearest curb, let their shoulders fall, and allowed the world to finally win. But something in him refused to do that. It was not loud, and it was not dramatic. There were no grand declarations, no defiant fists raised toward the sky. It was something small and stubborn, buried deep behind his tired eyes, flickering quietly the way a candle flame holds on, even when the wind is trying its hardest to put it out. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was simply the refusal to disappear. Whatever it was enough to keep his legs moving when his heart wanted to give up. So he kept walking, not because the road ahead promised anything better, and not because he believed the laughter would stop. He kept walking because stopping felt like a kind of dying, a slow surrender to everything that had already tried to break him and failed. Each step, however clumsy, however mocked, was its own quiet act of defiance. And somewhere deep inside, that tired, hungry, laughed at man. A story far greater than his current suffering was already beginning to take shape, waiting patiently for the day the world would finally understand him. One day, in a small, dimly lit room, he stood in front of a mirror that had long since cracked down the middle, its silver backing peeling away at the edges like something slowly giving up on itself. It seemed fitting somehow, that even his reflection came to him broken. He looked into it the way a man looks into something he has been avoiding for a long time. And what stared back at him was not vanity, not curiosity, but sadness plain, quiet, undeniable sadness, worn into the lines of his own tired face. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting himself see it fully. The hunger, the mockery, the cold mornings, the nights spent wondering if tomorrow would be any different, all of it had settled into his eyes, and the mirror refused to let him look away. He felt the familiar sting behind his eyes, the same one that had followed him through every lofted step and every closed door. It would have been easy, so easy. Let the tears finally come. But instead, something unexpected happened. Perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps out of some deep, stubborn instinct he didn't fully understand himself. He did not cry. He raised his eyebrows instead, high and absurd, and felt the strange pull of his own face shifting into something unfamiliar. He reached up and twisted the ends of his mustache, exaggerating the gesture the way a fool might. And then, almost involuntarily, he smiled at himself in that cracked glass. It was a ridiculous sight, a hungry, broken man in a torn coat, making faces at his own reflection in a mirror held together by nothing but habit. And yet, in that ridiculous moment, something inside him shifted. He looked at that strange, funny face staring back at him, eyebrows raised, mustache twisted, mouth curved into a smile that didn't quite match the sadness still lingering in his eyes, and he realized something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Pain did not have to be the only truth of a man's face. It could sit right beside laughter. It could even be transformed by it. He understood, standing there in that quiet, cracked mirror moment. That laughter was not the absence of suffering. It never had been. Laughter was not a wall people built to hide from their pain, nor a lie they told to pretend it wasn't there. Laughter was the answer to suffering, a response, a defiance, a way of taking something that could destroy a man and turning it instead into something that could move an entire room to tears of joy rather than despair. He had spent so long believing his sadness was something to hide, something shameful, something to bury deep beneath a stiff upper lip. Now he saw it differently. His sadness did not need to be hidden. It needed to be transformed. From that moment forward, he made a quiet decision, one that would shape everything that came after. His tears would not be allowed to drown him. Instead, they would fuel him. They would become the raw material of something greater than his own suffering. Every hungry night, every mocking laugh from strangers, every borrowed shoe and torn coat would no longer simply be a source of shame. They would become a story, his story, a story built not despite his pain, but because of it. He looked down at his shoes, still too big, still worn thin at the soles, and instead of feeling only embarrassment, he felt something closer to possibility. He patted his empty pockets, and instead of only feeling their emptiness, he began to imagine what he might fill them with instead. Not coins, not comfort, but characters, stories, moments that could make people laugh even as their own hearts ached. He took his broken shoes and empty pockets, his torn coat and clumsy walk, and began quietly, patiently, to turn them into something the whole world would one day recognize, adore, and carry in their hearts for generations to come. That man became Charlie Chaplin, the same hungry boy who once walked cold streets in shoes too big for him, the same young man who was laughed at for his torn coat and his clumsy, uneven walk, grew into someone whose face would one day be recognized in every corner of the world. But before the fame, before the applause, before his name became synonymous with laughter itself, he was simply a man who had learned one quiet, powerful secret. Smile even when your heart is heavy. It was never about pretending the pain wasn't there. He never claimed the hunger didn't ache, or that the mockery didn't sting, or that the loneliness of those cold mornings simply disappeared because he chose to smile. The pain remained. It always remains, for all of us, in one form or another. His secret was not the absence of suffering, it was the refusal to let that suffering have the final word. He smiled, not because his heart was light, but precisely because it was heavy. And he had decided, quietly and stubbornly, that heaviness would not be allowed to win. This is the truth he carried with him through every torn coat and every empty pocket. Your struggles do not define you. They never did, not for him, and not for anyone who has ever stood in front of a cracked mirror, wondering if they had anything left to give. What defines a person is not the storm they walk through, but the way they choose to walk through it, head slightly raised, shoulders still moving forward, even when every step feels borrowed and uncertain, like shoes that never quite fit. And somewhere today, in some quiet corner of the world, someone is walking through their own version of that storm. Perhaps they too feel the weight of a heart no one else can see. Perhaps they too have been laughed at, overlooked, or made to feel smaller than they are. Perhaps they stood, just this morning, in front of their own cracked mirror, staring at their own tired reflection, wondering if there was any strength left inside them at all. If that is you, know this: the man in the mirror was not so different once. Hunger, mockery, loneliness, he knew them intimately, and still he found a way to raise his eyebrows, twist his mustache, and smile. So wear your smile like armor, not as a mask to hide behind, and not as a lie you tell the world, but as a shield you choose to carry, deliberately and bravely, into whatever storm you happen to be walking through. Let your pain, instead of draining you, become your purpose. Let it shape you into someone who understands suffering deeply enough to offer real comfort to others who suffer too. This is what he did. He took his hunger and turned it into empathy. He took his loneliness and turned it into connection. He took his broken shoes and his torn coat and turned them into a story that would make millions laugh, and in laughing, feel just a little less alone. Because in the end, the world does not need you broken. It has enough brokenness already, scattered across every street and every quiet room where someone sits alone with their sadness. What the world needs, what it has always needed, is you smiling not because everything is perfect, but because you have decided to keep moving forward anyway. It needs you rising again and again, however clumsily, however uncertain your steps may feel. It needs proof that a person can be hungry and still hopeful, can be laughed at and still dignified, can be heartbroken and still choose every single morning to twist that mustache, raise those eyebrows, and smile. That was his gift to the world, and it can be yours too. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, just the quiet, stubborn decision to keep walking, keep smiling, and keep turning your struggles into something the world will remember long after the storm has passed.